the summer corrections, you guys. You can't bedazzle handcuffs. Bedazzler punches through fabric, not metal. So if you were off to prison and that was the one thing you were looking forward to, yet another parade a jackal is rained on. We showed a picture of Abraham Lincoln in a fedora. We said it was a fedora. We were told it was a trilby. Also that Lincoln could not have worn a fedora because the style did not come into fashion until 1883 when French actress Sarah Bernhardt wore one in a play called Fedora. This is all helpful for you to know if you're ever looking for a fun conversation ender. You guys talking about hats? Gary. I said that koozie was a portmanteau of beer and cozy. I misspoke, of course. It is a portmanteau of cool and cozy. Beer plays no part in it. Of course, a part of a portmanteau is known as a portmanteau. My favorite portmanteau involving the word beer is the word for when you have a beer with your fiance, which is, of course, Kelly Rowland. Hey, you guys, Avatar takes place on a moon, not a planet. I said it was a planet, it's a moon. And if you remember from the film, to get to that moon, you have to enter a cryosleep because the trip is so long. And if you want to know how long, in order to get there, it takes almost as long as it takes to make Avatar 2. What is the holdup with Avatar? I mean, what little Na'vi I know, I'm going to forget. The moon's name is Pandora. And it's a very hard place. It's an almost unlivable place for humans because it's Pandora with ads. My in-laws have Pandora with ads. One of the many draws. We mentioned that Sidney Powell chugging a Diet Dr. Pepper during her January 6th testimony was bad brand recognition for Diet Dr. Pepper. Our joke was it was almost as bad as that time Mussolini was pictured drinking a Fanta. And well, we heard a lot from you guys about the history of Fanta. And if you're a big fan, don't run to the Wikipedia page. Let's just say Fanta's history has a German element. Which is never, if you're a fan of the genealogy shows, it's never good when a German element pops up. When Skip Gates said, now your grandparents were from Buenos Aires, but did you know they moved there from Berlin? Fanta originated in 1940 in Germany due to the American trade embargo against Nazi Germany. They had to find a replacement. You know, because no matter what you think about World War II and the different sides, and I don't want to relitigate it, everybody loves soda pop. This made me laugh a lot because this is all on the Wikipedia page. So now we've established the Fanta history. In February 2015, a 75th anniversary version of Fanta was released in Germany, packaged in glass bottles. An Associated Television ad referenced the history of the drink and said the Coca-Cola Company wanted to bring back the feeling of the good old times, which was interpreted by many to mean Nazi rule. The ad was subsequently replaced. Klaus! Klaus, get in here! Based on your tone, you've seen the new ad? Klaus. But people still like Fanta. We got it. Look, some stuff came out of Nazi Germany that had upside, right? VW cars, Fanta, U.S. space program. Oh, I also was told I'm pronouncing Fanta wrong. It's Fanta. So, to whoever was offended by my pronunciation, apologies, mein Führer. This is so again, we just had a 2-week hiatus. I spent it with my kids, lovely time with my kids. And you'll see why this is a transition. Because if I'm doing any corrections over the last 2 weeks, it's to my children, right? Things they get incorrect, and your job as a parent to correct them. So this is a true story and a true thing that my son said. We were talking about the fact that, this is to our 6-year-old Ash, how lucky he is that he knows all 4 of his grandparents and how his grandmother never met any of her grandparents. My wife's mother, her family, her parents were Holocaust survivors. It's a true story. So we were telling this to my son, and he's curious. You know, he's a 6-year-old, so he's curious. And he said, how did her grandparents die? And my wife said, well, they actually all died at the same time during a war. And he said, were they soldiers? And my wife, very deftly, I think, said, not all people who die in a war are soldiers. And then my 6-year-old said, oh, were they drummers? I guess the question is it okay when kids are too young to talk about the Holocaust yet? Do you go, yeah, they were drummers? Rabies. There were some different takes on rabies. We talked about rabies. Someone wrote, when I was 8 years old, we talked about whether or not you can test for rabies. And someone wrote, when I was 8 years old, I had to get shots for rabies due to being bitten multiple times by mice my sister and I had found in a sack of grain. 14 shots, 1 every day for 2 weeks in the stomach. That is awful, and I'm sorry you had to go through that as an 8-year-old. How do you get bitten multiple times by the mice? At some point, you just gotta get your hand out of the sack, right? I mean, I get it. I mean, if I was an 8-year-old, came across a sack of grain, I'd be pretty excited too. But at some point, you gotta just let the mice have their grain. But then somebody else said, hold on real quick. There is, wait, hold on. Oh, I said you had to cut off the head to test for rabies. And someone said cutting off the head and sending it out to get tested is an outdated method of rabies detection. Nowadays, tests are performed on samples of saliva, serum, spinal fluid, and skin biopsies of hair follicles at the nape of the neck. So it's outdated to cut off the head. So if you ever are getting tested for rabies and your doctor describes himself as old-fashioned, run! We had 2 jokes in surprise inspection that I did not name the writer of. They were both Scollins. One was a lawyer who exposed himself, referred to his genitals as Exhibit D. And the other was about Mac Tonight, the moon-headed McDonald's mascot doing cocaine. If I ever don't mention it, it might be Scollins. Mac Tonight, very much like Fanta, developed by Pol Pot. An early mascot for the Khmer Rouge. Oh, somebody wrote, hey Seth, has Wally, cue card Wally, has Wally considered becoming an actor? His face is very expressive. Mm-hmm. Corrections is, again, this isn't a place to brag or toot our own horn, but it is Emmy nominated for its second time. And against some very fine competition once again. Defending champ, Carpool Karaoke, Randy Rainbow. Stephen Colbert's Tuning Out the News. And I think you should leave with our friend Tim Robinson. So wonderful. I don't know who I'm going to vote for. But I'm going to use this time in between rounds to watch them all. And I will, at some point, politic. But not necessarily for this, if I don't feel like it's the best one. Because who am I if I just throw away my vote? We mentioned Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and his poem, Paul Revere's Ride, and how that poem is historically inaccurate. And somebody wrote this. I could not verify this fact about Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, but somebody wrote that he wrote The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere for the most noble of reasons, a girl. He was wooing a girl whose aunt was a Paul Revere descendant and super in to that part of her identity. And the story goes, Longfellow wrote the poem to get in her good graces so he could get with the niece. And if that's true, Henry, I hope you got your Wadsworth. We have fun. Oh, the mugs. I got an update today on the mugs. I got some very exciting news about the mugs. And I was told I could make a very exciting announcement about the mugs. And then right before I came out, someone ran up to me and said, "Don't say anything about the mugs." But I think it's pretty close, you guys. And here's the thing, I need to remind you again, we gotta move the mugs. We gotta move the mugs, because I made some promises to the merch people about the mugs. And I'm realizing, after having talked to some of my friends who went to business school, that I made a mistake. Because they said, how many mugs do you think we'll need? And I said, I don't know, about 300,000 people watch an episode of Corrections each week. And they said, how many do you think will buy mugs? And I said, half. That might be high, guys. So, like, maybe just get one for you and get one for a friend? Anyway, tune in next week for hopefully exciting mug news, and we'll see you for yet another Summer Corrections.